So, hey everyone, as you may have seen on my Facebook profile on the weekend, it's quite an important date for me. 8 years ago, October the 17th, 2007 was when I was diagnosed with HIV. And I had when I've talked about it, I've always been a bit elusive about how I've got it, saying that, I was safe and I still managed to get it. And that conjures up a lot of questions from people, fair enough. But I don't really tend to elaborate very much, and I never really talk about it to anyone. And a lot of people now ask about it, and I've had messages after Saturday asking more questions about how I got it. And there are two reasons I don't like to talk about it. One, because it's quite hard. It's quite upsetting. I get quite upset about talking about it because I remember it very clearly. And the other reason is because I did get it, even though I was safe and I got it orally. I don't want it to worry people about getting it, but even though you're still safe. I got it through a mixture of circumstances I don't think anyone would be able to repeat, to be honest, if it ever happened again. It's so unlikely that people would have the same circumstances under which I got it. I was really unfortunate. So those are the reasons that I don't really talk about it. But so many people have asked, and maybe it's time I do it once and then it's done. So I met this guy back in 2007 and had a great time with him and spent the weekend with him, and that's obviously when I contracted it. And at the time I didn't notice at the time, but he didn't know he had it either and had just recently been infected himself. And so I spent the weekend and went about my life after that. And at the time I was living in Switzerland. I wasn't even in the UK. I was away working in Switzerland for a pharmaceutical company. And November came, and halfway through November I started to get very sick. I felt quite ill, like flu-y kind of ill, and I was off work for a week, and then went back to work and felt okay. And then the next week, the weekend after I gone back to work, I started to feel ill again, and I was not quite right, and I got worse and worse. And come Monday, I couldn't do very much at all. I was really ill. I couldn't walk, I couldn't breathe, I couldn't eat, I couldn't swallow. I had a running temperature, and by Tuesday I felt incapacitated. I virtually crawled out of bed. I couldn't really drink any water, and I knew something was wrong. And I sort of didn't want to be too dramatic, so I jumped in a taxi and thought, okay, well, I'll go to the emergency room at the local hospital. And when I got there, they were a bit bemused and thought I was having a panic attack. And I said, no, this isn't a panic attack. This is not right. And so they did some tests and like chest x-ray and stuff. And then I was trying to be a bit kind of stingy with the test because it costs money when you don't have great health insurance over there. So I was kind of to hold back on too many tests without at the same time. And they came up to me and they said, oh, will you do a HIV test? And I was very blasé and laughed. I'd had one done 5 weeks ago before that, and it was negative. So I kind of laughed and went, of course you can, but there's no point, it'll be negative. I just completely washed it off. And they came back again and asked me a second time, and I was like, okay, if you really want to do it, do it. But it was really pointless, going to come back negative. And I kind of put it to the back of my mind and didn't think any more of it. And then a couple of days passed, and I was admitted and put on a ward, and two of my friends from my work came to see me and next to my bed, and one of the doctors came up to me and said, we want to talk to you about some of the results that have come back. And I hadn't even thought anything more about the HIV test at that point. It wasn't on my mind in the slightest. And I said, oh, well, you can talk to me here. My friends are okay. And he said, no, I think we need to talk to you in private about some of this. And even then, I didn't put two and two together. And they wheeled me to a room. They're quite blunt in Switzerland. They don't mince their words. And I walked into a room and there were about 5 people on one side of the table and me on the other, on my own. And they were very straightforward. They just said, "Oh, Mr. Childers, we're very sorry, your HIV test has come back and it's positive." And I just stood there, or sat there, and I don't remember very much. I remember going to push myself off the chair, and I remember saying, "I'm going to be really sick. I need to go." And I don't remember much after that. I remember being wheeled back to the bed, and my friends were still there, and the look on their faces, they must have just been like, "What the hell has just happened to you?" Because I was in such a state. I was almost like disconnected. I looked like I had just, I don't know, I just wasn't there. And I think they kind of realised something had happened, and they obviously put 2 and 2 together a bit easier than I had done. And they quickly left, and the doctor stayed behind and said, "Well, we need to talk about some other things too. Not only have you got HIV, you've got septicemia. We've found E. coli in your bloodstream, and we reckon that's why that you're having such a reaction to the HIV infection, because your body just can't cope with everything it's had septicemia to deal with, and the HIV, and it's just gone into meltdown." And then we discussed how we got it, and then ironically, and this kind of put the puzzle together for a lot of it, I had my tooth extracted a month before. I had been to Germany to see the guy that gave it to me, and apparently when they looked at it, it hadn't healed properly. And then all the pieces started to fall together, that was probably how I had the septicemia through the tooth surgery. That's where the E. coli came from. And then, when I met this guy, he was obviously positive, but he never told me that, and he didn't know apparently. When I spoke to him later, I had to tell him that he had it. And it all started to fit together, that I was kind of a sitting duck, really, for this, because I had a giant hole in the back of my mouth, which I thought was fine. I thought it was healed over, and it actually hadn't. It was kind of like a prime target sitting there. So I stayed in for a week. I was put on quite strong IV ciprofloxacin to try and clear the septicemia, and then got discharged. And that's probably one of the hardest weeks there, because they're not nasty people in Switzerland in the medical industry, but they're quite blunt. I mean, they're not. I wouldn't say I felt very kind of a sense of overwhelming care and sympathy. They're kind of, it is what it is, get on with it. And the worst place they could have put me, actually, they put me in a ward on the top of a tower block, and I was like on the 12th floor or something. I can't remember now exactly. And my bed was facing a window, floor-to-ceiling window, and I just remember looking at that window, just thinking, God, I remember looking down on the street, and there was a tram coming, and I think you can gather the rest. It's not difficult to really think what I was thinking at the time. I then told my family, I tried to tell them in a very blasé attitude so they wouldn't worry too much, and that's not very easy. And I still to this day don't know kind of how they really reacted when I told them, because I wasn't there on the other end of the phone. And then I got discharged. I came home, went back to work after about a week or so, once I'd kind of recovered enough to go back. And then I lost my job. I was told my contract wasn't being renewed, and then found myself in a place where I was in a country away from home, just been told I had HIV, and that I would have to leave my job, and at that point I thought leave the country, to be honest, because I just didn't want to stay. So in 3 months I had gone from being quite happy in a job, happy-ish, because I was never really truly happy in Switzerland, but happy in a job, to having HIV, septicemia, then being laid off my job, having to leave the country, find a new job in the UK, and find somewhere to live in the UK, all in the space of 3 months. So there you go, folks. That's kind of as much in a nutshell as I can put it, really. There are other things, but that's the crux of it. So I think you can understand why, for me to explain that to a lot of people again and again, is kind of quite difficult, and I don't tolerate talking about it. It's probably as calm as I've been for a long time, kind of recounting all the events. And as I say, I don't want people to worry now about picking up HIV orally. It's so unlikely, really, in the scheme of things. And I was unlucky. I was so unlucky with the set of circumstances I was faced with. The fact that I had septicemia to begin with when I contracted it. The fact that, I had a massive sore in my mouth that was a kind of a bit of a open door for it. The fact that the guy that gave it to me had only just contracted it himself, so he was, crawling with the virus. Wouldn't have taken much to give me it. And, all of these events compressed together, I was just probably very unfortunate, and those circumstances will never be repeated again for someone else, thank God. So thank you for listening. If you ever want to message me about it for any more information or details, feel free. And yeah, that's where to leave it. Thanks.